If I let myself find joy, if I let myself relax, the other shoe's gonna drop.
You mentioned the interconnection between child and maternal mental health.
Our ability to create internal calm, regardless of what's happening externally, is gonna transmit to our babies from preconception through childbirth.
Kate Kripke is a licensed clinical social worker and certified perinatal mental health counselor dedicated to supporting mothers' emotional well-being from preconception through early childhood.
For over 20 years, she has helped mothers navigate the challenges of motherhood, including as the founding director of the Parent and Family Wellness Center in Boulder, Colorado.
What are some of those beliefs that you see them being trapped in?
I cannot stress this enough, that we understand that the feelings are never the problem. The root cause of that are those deep, limiting, fear-based beliefs we have about ourselves. That kind of stress and tension inside of our body is not a happy, safe place for a fetus to grow.
Exactly.
There's actually nothing to fix here. Stop pathologizing emotional discomfort.
Welcome to Prescribing the Truth. I'm Dr. Nichole Morris, a Catholic naturopathic doctor and natural fertility expert. Around here, we don't just accept the mainstream narrative, we question it. My goal with every episode is to share the love of Jesus with you and empower you to make informed, confident decisions for you and your family. So grab a cup of tea, get comfy, maybe even throw on your tin hat, and let's dive in. Welcome to Prescribing the Truth. Super excited to be here with you today and to have my friend and my colleague, Kate Kripke, with us here today. Kate is a maternal and child mental health specialist. I have the honor of working with Kate through our program as well, and she is the founder of the Calm Connection System. So it's an honor to have you here with us today, Kate. I'm going to kind of let you take it away and introduce yourself and tell us all of the things about you, and then we'll kind of dig in.
Thank you, Nichole, and such an honor to be here. I feel so grateful to be partnering with you on so many different levels right now. Yes, so I have been working in the field of maternal and child mental health for just over 20 years. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and have certification in perinatal mental health. Really what that means is that I have been supporting women in their transition to motherhood from preconception through early motherhood for a very long time. And my foundation of my work is really based on the undeniable truth that maternal and child mental health are deeply interconnected. And when we look at, just for the purpose of this conversation, especially when we look at maternal mental health, I really want to invite everyone to think of this as not just the mental health of mothers when their babies are on the outside, right? But that whole process of becoming a mother. And, I think maybe the short explanation of why I got into this work is because I was raised by a very loving mother, very loving parents, but both of whom struggled with really significant anxiety in their lives and brought that tension and that stress forward in their parenting of me and my brother. And I'm a daughter. I looked up to my mom. She is no longer alive, but certainly was, that person in my upbringing that I just really loved and wanted to be like. And the woman I wanted to be like was a woman who was kind of chronically stressed all the time. And that got passed down to me and the way I moved through my own life. And so I've really just been dedicated to helping women learn how to live with more ease and grace and groundedness and peace and calm, not just because so they feel better, but so that they're more likely to become pregnant, so they're more likely to have the childbirth that they most want, so that they're more likely to raise healthy, happy kids and have a really secure, strong relationship with them. So there is Kate Kripke in a nutshell, Nichole.
Well, we are so happy to meet her. Thanks for sharing that, Kate. You mentioned something that I'd love to dig into a little bit. You mentioned the interconnection between child and maternal mental health. And I think that that's something that's often overlooked, both by medical providers and women themselves, right? How is the mental health that we carry preconception and during pregnancy influencing the mental health of our baby once born? Would you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to define mental health first, if I can, because that's a really important thing. I think there are a lot of myths around what it means to be mentally healthy and mentally well. And I really want to help make sure everyone understands what we're talking about here. So the definition of mental health, right, if we really break it down into layperson language, what's required is that my my emotional experience matches what's happening externally, right? So mental health essentially means, and mental wellness means that I'm willing to feel all the feelings that come with being a human on this planet. And we know that being a human on this planet ideally has lots of moments of joy and connection and hopefulness and motivation and excitement, but also has plenty of moments of uncertainty and unpredictability. And in those moments of uncertainty and unpredictability, we are hardwired to feel some fear, anxiety, sadness, disappointment, guilt. These are all also very normal human emotions that are actually here to inform us to make really intentional decisions. So mental health does not mean that we're feeling good all the time. It means that we're willing to feel both ends of the spectrum, but not get attached to either. It also means that we have healthy coping strategies to help us move from unpleasant emotions back to more pleasant ones. So if we get really stuck in things like fear or despair or hopelessness or anger or whatever it is, that's also not healthy, right? We want to be able to sort of move from one emotion to the other and back again, so that we can be fluid and really be present in our lives with what's right in front of us. When we have sort of internal stress, which by the way also might be often is caused by deep fear-based limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves or the world around us, our body is going to tense up and get tight internally. And then ultimately our behaviors or our actions, if they're coming from that place, are going to be fear-based and usually cause more disruption in our lives rather than less disruption in our lives. So if we're trying to become pregnant and we are moving through life in chronic stress, our body is going to internally be tense and tight. Our systems, our physical systems are not going to be working the way we want them to. Our digestive system, our immune system, our reproductive system. I want to sort of preface by maybe reminding you and me, because I think we both probably on some level at one point in our lives fell into the category of women who are trying to do it all and we're running around with all this stress and tension inside of our bodies. This is not actually pathology, right? This is like our body is doing its job. And if in our brain we're telling ourselves that something bad is happening or there's something wrong with us, our body is going to respond in the way it's supposed to when there's a threat. I feel like I'm actually going in 20 different directions at once right now, Nichole, but I think I just want to kind of begin at the start of this fertility journey and say, okay, if we are walking around with tension and tightness in our bodies are not going to function the way we want them to. If we're walking around with tightness and tension in our bodies because of sort of mental or psychological stress, we are not going to grow babies in a way that's fluid and giving all the nutrients we want to our babies and moving through kind of all the kind of internal systems that we want, because we're going to be releasing so much cortisol that the cortisol is going to impact things like the growth of the baby or maybe even time of birth, like preterm birth can happen, and childbirth is probably going to be in a different, right? Because we're holding tense and tight. And then when our body's on the outside, baby's on the outside, all of that internal stress and tension is going to come across in how we communicate with our babies. And we share a nervous system with our babies for quite a long time. Gosh, I just like flooded you with all that information. I don't know if I answered your question specifically, but does that make sense, Nichole?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So I think the first point that you were making, Kate, is that good mental health is being aware of how you feel, being able to recognize that and having the tools to cope with it, right? That doesn't mean that we never feel anxious. It doesn't mean that we never feel depressed. It doesn't mean that we never feel sad, right? We don't have to be happy 100% of the time to have quote unquote good mental health, right? I think your point is that all of it is good mental health if we can recognize it and have the tools to take action to help ourselves to cope and move through those different emotions, right? Would you say that synopsis is correct?
Yes, absolutely. And mental health, just so that we can break down, is psychological health. What are our thoughts? And our emotional health. What are our feelings? And again, yes, means we're willing to feel all of it.
Yes, absolutely. And to continue on, I think with the point that you're conveying is how our nervous system or our mental health as women, as mothers, influences that of our children, right? And I think it's a really great reminder how our nervous system and the nervous system of our child is intertwined for a long time post-birth also, right? And I think that we can see this really clear in situations. I'm sure you see with your clients. I see it with my clients, right? Sometimes I'll see a kiddo and the kiddo has a lot of stomach aches or anxiety themselves. And it's easy to see from the outside in, right? We can spot it easy when we're looking at someone else as opposed to ourselves. But it's like, oh, I can just just see that child is just like feeding off of mom's anxiety, or let's just say like germs for another example, right? These are just patterns that we instill in our kids. But if a mom is really anxious about germs, like her kid is more likely to have the same anxiety about that thing because it's been integrated and kind of into their thought process and their behaviors, if you will. So we can kind of like follow, create these patterns in our kids.
Our ability to create internal calm, regardless of what's happening externally, is going to transmit to our babies from preconception through childbirth. It's just a constant co-regulation. It's a constant transmission. And so again, the goal is not to always feel good or always be happy, but the goal is to be able to come back to a baseline of groundedness and calm and not get stuck in an emotional experience that creates stress and tension internally.
Absolutely. And what would you say to a situation such as, I think as mothers, like we are our children's safe place, right? This is where our children come to us to have their nervous system regulated before they're fully capable of doing that themselves. So I think that also speaks to the importance of being able to regulate our nervous systems, to have the tools so that we can be that safe space for our children. Is there a way that you kind of coach women through that?
Yeah. What I see in almost all of the group work that I do, which is really interesting. So when I get a bunch of women together, things become more apparent, right? You can see the common denominator. What happens for me in groups that I'm coaching is that I begin to notice that most of the women who are struggling with high levels of stress and tension and anxiety, sometimes guilt, are those who have quite fear-based, limited beliefs that are hardwired into their brains that they learned when they were young. And it doesn't mean that in this conversation we're having together, Nichole, or in the work I do, we have to spend all of our time there. The point is not to go back and reprocess all of that, but to just, to your point, build awareness, right? If I am moving through my life with some fear that I'm not enough, with some fear that I'm not okay, with some fear that I'm not worthy, I am going to see everything in my environment as not enough, not okay, and not worthy. And that will send a message to my body that there's a danger or a threat. And my body will respond in that way that we might describe as fear or anxiety or stress or tension. So it is really a process of doing many things at once. Yes, we want to be taking really good care of our brains to build resilience. We want to know how to breathe, to access internal calm. We want to know what our values are and make value-based decisions. But even before that, we might need to poke some holes in those fear-based beliefs that we have about how we are supposed to be moving through the world.
How would you connect that to the work that you're doing with the women in the fertility programs? We're very blessed and honored to have Kate as a coach in the fertility formulas. A few times a month, she works in a group setting with the women in our program, obviously struggling to conceive. So in the women that you're working with in our program, Kate, you're seeing some patterns of maybe self-limiting beliefs or things that the women struggling to conceive are really feeling about themselves. How do you see those connections coming together? Or what are some of those beliefs that you see them being trapped in?
They sound like, if I don't do it, nobody else will. I have to be focusing on everything all the time or something bad is going to happen. If I fail at something, that means that there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. It might be like an internal fear-based belief. And therefore, I have to prove to the world that I am good enough by making sure that everything around me is always organized and taken care of and that everybody always feels good. It's like a lot of always and never. It's a lot of internal expectation that my job is to take care of everybody else all of the time. It's a lot of beliefs that, the one that sticks out to me most, that actually it's funny, when I'm in your group, so often one person will say something and not only is everyone else nodding, but you can see everyone tear up a little bit. And doesn't turn into a big experience where everyone's crying, but there's just that little spark of recognition of like, oh my gosh, she said the thing that I have been feeling. And it's really around this idea that if I let myself play, if I let myself find joy, if I let myself relax, the other shoe's going to drop. Something bad is going to happen. Therefore, I have to remain stressed and activated and on top of everything and hypervigilant so that nothing crashes down around me. And it's interesting because, of course, what we know about mental health and well-being is that of an avoidance of play. If I don't have any play in my life, if I'm going all the time, if I'm micromanaging, if I'm trying to make sure I never disappoint anyone, if I'm trying to do everything that everyone else wants me to do, I am not going to feel any relief inside my body. That idea of peace, that's the word I hear so many people say. I just want to feel free. I just want to find peace. That doesn't coexist with this mindset we just talked about. And yet the antidote, the way to find it is to slow down and to play and to relax. And that for many of these women seems quote unquote dangerous. And then these are the women who are also coming to your program because they're having a really hard time conceiving. Because that kind of stress and tension inside of our body is not a happy, safe place for a fetus to grow.
Conception occurs when the nervous system can go from sympathetic to parasympathetic and get more into that resting and digesting unsafe space, right? If we're stuck in that sympathetic fight or flight, I just need to survive, right? Your body just thinking very primally is not going to be in a state where reproduction happens easily when our nervous system is fighting for survival. So I think that that's a really good point to bring up.
And it's a catch, right, Nichole? Because so many of the women that join your program are really high achievers. Like they like to have goals and check those things off their lists and get things done. And therefore they're in many ways, the forever good girl, right? They just want to do what they're told to do. And of course, while that could be really helpful in many environments, it's not so helpful to be trying to do it all and do it all perfectly when you're trying to conceive, because we need to make space for things to settle down. And that mindset doesn't allow for that space.
Do you see correlations or patterns from childhood in a lot of these women that have these same beliefs about themselves?
I do. Yeah. And it's worth just before I go into this naming that this does not mean that there was big T trauma, does not mean that these people were raised in families where their parents didn't love them, right? So I just want to sort of break the stereotype of your question and what I'm about to say. But yes, almost notoriously, these are women who are raised in families who are taught that uncomfortable emotions were bad and wrong. That if they felt sad, angry, scared, disappointed, whatever that thing is, that meant there was something wrong with them or something wrong with the environment. That creates this like stress and tension to make sure that I'm behaving a certain way, thinking a certain way, feeling certain things in order to be fully accepted, appreciated, loved, fill in the blank. And there's so much pressure in that. And again, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that most of the parents of folks in your program, and maybe people listening, certainly this was true of my parents, most of the parents loved them to pieces. This wasn't about quote unquote bad parenting. This was about missing the point of what we all need to feel safe, which is to feel seen, heard, and understood. And if I believe that in order to get what I need, I have to think a certain way and act a certain way and feel a certain way, then I'm constantly in an achievement-oriented brain. I can't slow down and just be. That achievement-oriented brain is really useful when we're trying to develop careers, right? Or solve problems. It's not so helpful if we want to turn on the rest and digest part of our nervous system.
If you're listening, you may be thinking about your own childhood and how you were raised that way. If you're listening, you may be thinking about how you parent and questioning, oh, do I do that to my child? Do I allow for my child's big emotions, right? When there's sadness or anger or fear or, quote unquote, acting out, which we know is not always, it's not bad behavior. It's our children trying to communicate with us, right? So what is your advice, Kate, to those that are listening that have children, right, that are parents and catch themselves sending their children to their room or off to be by themselves when there's an emotion that we don't want to take on, right? When they're just like throwing a tantrum or crying and the first instinct is like, go somewhere else and do that, right? What is your advice to parents in those situations so that we're not repeating those behaviors or those traumas and not allowing our children to feel and be supportive of them when they need us the most, which is in those big emotions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess I want to start with self-compassion, because what's not helpful is self-criticism, right? So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking about all these things that they're quote unquote doing when their kids are having a hard time, that might be recreating an experience they had as when they were children, we want to start with like, yeah, well, that makes sense. If that's what you were taught, that is what will happen if you're not pausing to ask the really hard, really brave, really vulnerable questions. And I think We've all been there to some degree. It's really important. I mean, I cannot stress this enough that we understand that the feelings are never the problem. The emotions are never the problem. They are so wise. And I've never in 20 plus years of this work had someone tell me what they were feeling and then tell me the context of the situation where I didn't automatically think and then say, well, of course you feel that way. Of course that's how you feel. It makes perfect sense.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Fertility Formula Masterclass. My team and I have helped hundreds of married couples conceive naturally without IUI or IVF. If you're struggling to get pregnant or stay pregnant and have been told there are no other options, don't stop searching. There is hope, and finding the root cause is key. If you want to learn more about how we can support you on your journey to motherhood, head over to drnicholemorris.com, and don't forget, Nicole has an H in it. All right, let's get back to the show.
We have to really begin by changing whatever limiting hardwired beliefs we have about feelings in general. That example you gave, your kid is crying and you're like trying to fix it really quickly, and that can look like, I mean, we can probably relate as kids ourselves. It can look anything like, I'll give you something to cry about, right? To here's a lollipop, to go cry in your room, right? Those are sort of three examples of what, as a generalizations of what this can look like. Really what's happening in those moments is we don't want to feel the uncomfortable feeling that's inevitable to feel when our children are uncomfortable. We will feel discomfort with them. That's mama bear. That's by design. The role of a mom or a parent is to be able to tend to their own nervous system first so that they can lend that regulated nervous system to their child. That is actually the magic in this, Nichole, because so many of us who weren't taught that emotions are okay when our children are having a hard time will kick up into that achievement brain and think to ourselves, okay, I have to solve this problem for my child so they don't feel this thing they're feeling. We think that that's good mothering in many instances, right? That my job is to prevent my child from ever feeling any emotional pain. I cannot stress enough how much this will backfire. As mom of two teenage daughters, 16 and 18, I will tell you the most meaningful mothering moments I've had with them is when I have allowed them to feel their own pain, their own emotional distress, and I've been right there with them. I'm not taking it on as my own. I'm not solving it for them or throwing kerosene on the fire by now getting anxious about their whatever it is. Tending to my own nervous system, feeling my feet on the ground, and I'm essentially saying, I've got you. I've got you. I'll be here with you until this whole thing ends, whatever it is. So I'm not problem solving. Now, I think sometimes this can be construed as sort of quote unquote gentle parenting to the extreme. I want to really make sure, I mean, you've got kids too. You and I both know this. Boundaries are so important, right? Like discipline and boundaries, they're really important, but we need to do that from a place of like groundedness first so that we can choose connection over control. And once we've connected, what happens next is going to have a more positive influence and probably lead our children to do what we ultimately hope that they do, which is find relief from their pain or put on their shoes or stop screaming, whatever the thing is. But we have to connect first, and we can't connect with our children until we connect with ourselves first. And I will just say this goes to preconception as well.
That's really beautiful advice, Kate. And I think that's really helpful for those that are listening, whether you're in this stage where you're still working to conceive, right? Or you have toddlers or you have teenagers or adult children, right? Is that reminder that like we are our children's steady. So we've got to get our nervous system in check so we can be their steady, right? That's how we protect them and their nervous system and teach them those skills along the way as well, right? They learn by watching how we respond. And I can see that even in my little ones who are 6 and 9, I hear them say things that I say, or I hear them kind of quote unquote like parent each other the way that I parent them. And sometimes I'm like, oh, you're actually listening. Oh, it's really nice to hear you say that way. So I think it's just a reminder that they're always listening and they're mimicking our behaviors. So if we can show them that calm, collected, steady, they're going to respond that same way. When they're little and they don't quite have the development to express the way that they're feeling. And to just, I can give an example from my own life recently. It was our last day of school. My daughter wanted this like red food coloring filled popsicle. And I'm like, there's no way you're going to eat that. So I'm like, no, just like walk past the popsicles. It's fine. We don't need to take one on the way out the door. We'll have a popsicle when we get home. It's going to be okay. Right. And my 6-year-old just like lost her marbles in the parking lot. Like, just losing her mind over this popsicle. And I'm like, child, like, it's going to be okay. Just get in the car. Like, we have to go, right? You're also not going to eat a popsicle in a brand new car. And she's just like losing her mind. And, I'm getting a little impatient and didn't respond the way in which that I would have liked to. And a little ways down the road, I'm like, she's not that upset about a popsicle. Like, she can have a popsicle whenever she wants it, So I'm like, okay, what's really going on here? Like, what are you really upset about, right? And as I started to question and inquire, really what she was upset about is not wanting to go to a new school next year and it being the last day of school. And she's sad to lose her friends or to leave her friends. And I'm just, thinking to myself in the moment, like, like I missed that one. Like I missed the boat on that one. It wasn't, not my best performance, but I was still able to recognize the situation, know kind of where I was failing her and circle back and say, okay, I know something deeper is happening here. Let's see if we can dig into that and support her. So then it gave us the opportunity to be able to talk through what school's going to look like next year and how she can still play with her friends, even though we're not going to school together and so on and so forth. So just a little example from my personal life.
It's so beautiful. And I think we all have limitless examples like that. And, just really simplify this. We will often focus on the behavior. Stop screaming. Just get in the car. We need to go. That is like, again, that's both because we might actually need to get somewhere. And also because it's the behavior that's the most obvious, to your point. Underneath every behavior is an emotion, and the emotion is never the problem. So even before really helping her understand what is the core root issue, and I mean it, like it can be this simple, all we really need to do in that moment is to reflect the emotion. Wow, you are feeling so disappointed right now. Wow, you are feeling so angry. And of course, the moment is you're disappointed that I said no to the popsicle. You're angry that you can't have the popsicle. You're whatever the thing is, right? But those emotions, you're right, are more attached to the school ending and having to go to a new school than the popsicle. But in the moment, it's just reflecting. I see you. I can see how angry you are right now. I actually get it. Who likes to be told they can't have something that they want? I mean, we don't even grow. Sometimes I want to scream and yell.
Exactly. Yeah, that's such great advice, Kate. And that is something that I try to do often with my kids. And I find that it does make a difference, right? Just validating their experience, that you see them, you see how they're feeling, and you're aware.
And again, Nichole, if I am coming at this mothering thing from some belief that says that uncomfortable emotions are bad and wrong, it's going to be really hard for me to do that thing I just suggested. So sometimes we don't understand why I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to do. And again, I knew you were giving this beautiful example about your kids and, certainly my kids too. It's not just our words. It's the energy behind the words. So that's why really understanding, we have to connect with ourselves first. We have to be able to really honor and acknowledge what I am experiencing with self-compassion. I have to learn how to do that before I can do that with a child. It's going to be really hard to do that with your kid if inside you're afraid of what you're feeling and what your child is feeling.
Well, thank you for sharing, Kate. That was very helpful and I think is going to serve the women, like I said, trying to conceive and those with little ones already. Before we wrap up, would you be willing to talk just a little bit more, a couple more questions for you? So the first is we see that high achieving women often have a lot of anxiety. What's the connection there?
I love this question. High achieving women, just a little neuroscience for you. Again, when we're in that high achieving mindset, what I define high achieving as is I have high expectations for myself. Achieving my goals is really important to me and my sense of self depends on it. So without the reaching of the goals and the achieving amazing things, I don't know who I am. So I want to separate the desire to achieve great things and want to reach goals and have big dreams. That's amazing. We do not need to change that from the way that we interpret our sense of self based on those things. Okay. So that's the first thing. If I am a high achiever and I need the accolades, I need the perfect score, I need the award, I need the job, I need the whatever it is outside of me to believe that I am okay and enough and worthy, then I'm going to have to keep chasing because those are dopamine hits. And from a neuroscientific perspective, we know that it's a dopamine hit. It does not last. So we'll need the next thing in order to feel that way about ourselves. So many of us who are high achievers are externally motivated. How I feel about myself is based on what's happening out here. That is a recipe for anxiety because nothing is ever enough. The experience I have is I can never have enough of what I need. You could say to me, Nichole, Kate, that was such a great podcast today. I really appreciated the conversation. And then I hang up with you and all my head is doing is spinning on all the things that I forgot to say or all the mistakes I made. It's not enough. Your comment, your reflection to me is not enough. That fuels so much internal angst and drive for more that we are likely to be running on very little resources because we're constantly trying to do the things outside of ourselves and we just can't catch the feeling we're looking for. In motherhood, forget about it. Because that high achieving brain, as I said earlier, is literally a different brain. It requires different parts of our brain are required for deep connection. Connection isn't about achieving. It's not about doing. So if I enter motherhood and I'm constantly trying to base my worth and my sense of self and a mom on how much I'm doing, I'm never going to find the feeling I'm looking for. I'm going to be just spurred by needing to do more, needing to have more, needing to feel something different than I feel. And that, in essence, is what causes anxiety because we're constantly worrying about failing ourselves or our children. And as we started, Nichole, I do believe that the root cause of that, if we're really talking about root causes, are those deep, limiting, fear-based beliefs we have about ourselves. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not okay. And therefore, I'm going to spend my entire life proving to the world that those things are not true. But I'm constantly being motivated by fear. And fear is what creates all the releases of brain chemicals into our body that creates those feelings that we would call anxiety. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think circling back to that root cause, right? Like that's our goal. That's what we're always trying to do here is get to the root cause of how we feel, why our symptoms are what they are, so on and so forth. So always taking back to that root cause and identifying why do we feel this way? Why are we anxious, right? What patterns or self-limiting beliefs does that stem from? Beautiful.
One more thing I just want to add is that what many of us will do in those moments to try to not feel anxious is try to control more. We'll micromanage. We'll try to control the things that we actually don't have control over, which will make us feel more anxious. And that's just that loop that we can so easily get stuck in.
For those that are listening that are trying to conceive, what would your number one piece of advice be in terms of having good mental health for those walking through the journey?
I've got two answers to that question on two ends of the spectrum. First and foremost, I would really invite those women to ask themselves, what do you believe is true about yourself coming into this journey? And then the next question is, what would you need to believe was true about yourself in order to move through this journey with patience, resilience, groundedness, and calm? What would you need to believe was true about yourself in order to move through this journey with those things? Because a fertility journey there's so much unpredictability and uncertainty. There's a lot of disappointment for a lot of people. It is usually not smooth. So we need to, on some level, trust that we're okay even when. That the end result, again, doesn't base our sense of, doesn't confirm or deny our sense of okayness. So that's the first thing. Second, the emotion's never the problem. Really understand that you're going to feel all of it in this roller coaster of experience. And the third is really to understand that anything that you do to tend to your biological or your physical, your emotional, your psychological, your spiritual health, anything that you do to tend to those things is in service of this baby that you are trying to conceive. Hands down, an incredibly important part of that perspective.
If you are listening to this and you're in that phase of life where you're trying to conceive, I really encourage you to rewind back a minute or two and listen to the beginning of what Kate was saying of her biggest piece of advice and take out a piece of paper and a pen and kind of just write or journal and answer some of those questions that Kate asked here just a couple of minutes ago in terms of her biggest piece of advice to those trying to conceive. So that'd be a little thing that you could actually take some action right now and use that as a tool to support yourself. What would you say to the husbands, Kate, of the wives that are walking through this journey?
Oh man, what would I say to the husbands of the wives who are walking through this journey? I mean, I think I would say the same thing I keep saying. The feelings are never the problem. I think there is a tendency to want to fix, right? You watch your wife struggling and feeling all the ups and downs that just inevitably come with this experience. And it's hard to see the people who we care about struggling and we want to fix things, but there's actually nothing to fix here. there's really nothing to fix. And I think probably that would be it. I could go in like 12 other directions right now, but I really want to stop pathologizing emotional discomfort. It feels really important that we understand that it doesn't have to be a problem, right? The despair you feel in one moment, we can look at that as a really normal part of this journey that will move. And the moment we look at that as a problem is the moment we hook our teeth into something that actually we can move through with grace and then move on to the next thing if we allow it.
Do you have tools or recommendations that you make, though, for husbands to be able to support their wives and kind of keep their wives on track with the avoidance of pathologizing that?
Again, what we most want to feel safe is to feel seen, heard, and understood. I see you. And again, it doesn't have to be words. It can be eye contact. It can be shoulder squeeze as you're walking past. It can be a reminder that you're in this together. Things happen when they are supposed to happen. Like, I really, really believe that. We need to sort of create space for all of this to happen. And I think this is a journey for an entire family. It's not, I think many women going through a fertility journey feel very alone. And I would just remind, those husbands out there to really honor this. This is a process and filled with uncertainty and unpredictability. And I guess also we just want to say, I don't know that men take care of themselves the way they need to either. So I really want to say it's like a both and, right?
Takes
it's like,
two to tango, right?
Takes two to tango. And what we're looking for ultimately, of course, is family health. That's what we're looking for, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's how we're working to have a multi-generational impact on the world at the end of the day. And I think it's just presence also, kind of like you alluded to, Kate, just like eye contact, a gentle shoulder squeeze. It's just presence, being in the space and in the emotion and in the process together, whether you're walking through a preconception journey or you're walking through parenting, right? I've been on my own preconception journey, my own infertility journey for 4 years, and now I'm into motherhood, right? And honestly, I don't really know if one's easier or harder. I don't think it's not a competition you can say, but it's just a journey. You have to be in that journey committed together for both of you to feel more supported and at peace and have a more relaxed nervous system.
There is actually a really helpful question to ask, and I guess maybe we can leave your listeners with this as well. As a couple, I think the question I would invite people to ask is, when this is all over, however it ends for us, with a baby or without a baby, because again, we could have a whole podcast on what happens when we get attached to things, which we will not dive into now. But whenever this is over, whatever that means, how do we want to feel? And what are the choices that we can make together between now and then that will make it more likely that we access those feelings? Because really, that's what we're looking for. We are looking for feelings. And many of us say, I won't feel that way until I have this baby. I won't feel this way until I achieve that goal. And we want to really understand that actually we can access those feelings way before that thing happens. All these little decisions will help us get closer to those feelings that we're looking for, and they're baby steps.
One foot in front of the other, right? One of the coaches on our team always says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, just one little step at a time, right? Just keep moving forward. Well, thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for chatting about all the different things that we did and sharing your wisdom with our community and all of our listeners here. If people are interested in learning more about what you have to offer or the work that you do in the world, how can they learn a bit more about you? How can they get in contact with you? Where will they find you?
Thanks for asking. Over on Instagram at Kate Kripke. I really love engaging with people over there. So I would encourage anyone that has questions about anything they heard me talk about today to come find me, and I'm happy to answer questions on the back end. I will also send you a link, Nichole, that just talks about the Connection system and really some things that I've learned in my journey of becoming a mom and raising two children that are now 16 and 18 that, I consider myself a high achieving, recovering perfectionist who struggled with tons of anxiety in my life. So I will send a link to something that will just give more information on that.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate it, Kate. Thank you for being here. We'll make sure that you have all the links to reach Kate. If you are struggling to conceive, you're looking for support, you would like physical support and also the mental health support, you can also catch Kate in our program. And again, we appreciate you being here, Kate. It means a lot to me. I'm super honored to have this conversation with you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me, Nichole. Love being here.
Thanks for hanging out with me on today's episode of Prescribing the Truth. If you loved our chat, you can find me on all the socials. Come say hi on Instagram at dr.NicholeMorris. And don't forget, I drop exclusive content on YouTube every week, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Also, I've got to tell you, if you are in need of high-quality, research-backed supplements, check out shopdrmorris.com for my full line of third-party tested, USA-made products. My Prenatal Plus is top of the line for fertility support, and if you've got little ones, grab a bottle of Kids Complete too. Lastly, if you and your husband are trying to conceive naturally without IUI or IVF, my team and I would love to support you, pray with you, and walk this journey with you. Just head over to drnicholemorris.com. That's Dr. Nichole Morris, Nichole with an H, to book a preconception consultation with me. Thanks for joining me today. Stay informed and God bless.